Welcome into the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. It is Monday morning. We had another big weekend of recruiting. We're going to cover it all today on the Inside Scoop. We had some major junior days happening across the country. We had five-star Terry Bussey take his official visit to Georgia this weekend. Remember, he's committed to A&M, but UGA is looking for one more five-star before the end of this cycle. Going to talk to Rusty Mansell about that from Dogs HQ. But the big news, in the way that I want to start today's show, the On3 2024 recruiting rankings have been finalized. This morning, I talked with On3 Director of Scouting and Rankings, Charles Power, about the changes. You can go ahead and find that video in the feed right now. Some good stuff from Charles there. And let's take a look at the final 32 five-stars in the 24 cycle. Here's 32 through 11. You see Trades Green grabs that last spot at 32. David Stone, 29. Cooper Cousins, he's headed to Penn State. He is a newly minted five-star at 27. Luke Kromenhawk is a five-star quarterback at 26. Jordan Seaton, the crown jewel of Coach Prime's 2024 class, he's in there at 22. You see Terry Bussey, we just talked about, at number 15 overall. And then the Miami Hurricanes signee Justin Scott in there at 11. Now here is 10 through 1. Jeremiah Smith in the top spot. No surprise there. But DJ Lagway, he ends the cycle as On3's number one QB. Remember, it was Dylan Raiola for a while. Then it was Julian Sayin. But it ends with DJ Lagway heading to the Florida Gators. There was a run by Texas A&M late. But DJ Lagway, your number one overall quarterback. Then you got Cam Coleman, Ellis Robinson, Julian Sayin slides out of the number one spot at QB to number two ranked QB for On3. LJ McCray in there at 6. Jordan Ross. How about this? Newly minted five-star, also the number one edge in America. Then you got Ryan Williams, who recommitted to Alabama last week. Justin Williams, no relation. And Marquise Lightfoot rounds out your top 10. Let me know. How do you guys feel about these rankings? What do you think? Who's your number one? Is it Jeremiah Smith? Is it someone else? What do you think? Let me know. Comment section below. How are you feeling about our final rankings here at On3? I'm sure there's a lot of talk about that. All right. We're going to talk UGA. We're going to talk Terry Bussey visit. We're also going to get with Rusty on QB recruiting for 2025. It's just starting to heat up in Athens. LSU, they are bringing DBU back. We talked to Shea Dixon on that. Ohio State, who's Brian Hartline's top wide receiver targets? I'm sure everybody wants to know. I mean, Brian Hartline only recruits the best, so we're going to highlight that on this show. Big show. Stay tuned. Let's get to it. Georgia has one more five-star that they're chasing in the 2024 cycle, and he was on campus in Athens this weekend for an official visit. I got Rusty Mansell of Dogs HQ on the show today. We're going to break it down. What are Georgia's chances at flipping Terry Bussey? Also, I want to talk to him about a little 2025 QB recruiting. But first, Dog fans, appreciate you guys always tuning in. If you watched any of our videos in the past, do me a favor right now. Hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We're here for you. Hit subscribe for me. All right, let's bring on Rusty Mansell, Dogs HQ. Rusty, this weekend was the official visit weekend for Terry Bussey. Heading into this weekend, who were the teams with the chance to flip him from Texas A&M?
I think LSU and Georgia are the two main ones you hear the most about. And, he was at Georgia this past weekend for his official visit. Glenn Schumann, T-Rob, Tavares Robinson, and Dante Williams, the new defensive back coach from USC, were at his house last Monday night. So he follows that return trip for an official visit this weekend, left campus around 2 p.m. on Sunday. And I think Georgia, look, I've kind of been upfront with this with Georgia fans. I think they're on the outside looking in, but this weekend certainly didn't hurt any chance they have.
Yeah. And how long has the relationship been with Georgia? Because I know T-Rob comes in from Alabama, but was Georgia in contact with him even before T-Rob made it to campus?
Not as much. The key here is Dante Williams coming from USC. Dante Williams was recruiting him at USC, so he came over and he goes to the Under Armour game and does interviews the first day, and all of a sudden he kind of makes news that he's going to take an OV to Georgia. Nobody really heard his name much in this, but that relationship with Dante Williams carried over into this. Tavares Robinson, T-Rob obviously knew him some for Alabama, but when you look at that connection there, that's certainly what cracked the door for Georgia to get in. And Glenn Schumann has kind of been heavily involved with this since they started recruiting him I would say at a higher pace the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and we know Terry Bussey committed to Texas A&M, but I mean, look at the coaching changes. New staff at
Yes.
A&M, new DB coaches at LSU, new DB coaches at Georgia. So how much do relationships matter in this recruitment, and who's got the longest standing relationships here?
I don't know who has the longest standing, but I do know that Dante Williams has known this young man for a while, and that certainly helps Georgia. You got new defensive back staff at LSU. Corey Raymond coming back over from Florida, and you got new staff at Texas A&M. So he's going to take his time. He will be at Texas A&M this weekend. They wanted that last visit. They're going to get it. Kind of the big thing I'm watching this week, Josh, is when does Kirby Smart use his in-home visit?
Right.
Is he gonna try to go Thursday night before he leaves Friday morning to go to Texas A&M? He's going to try to get that last in-person conversation with him. He plays basketball too, so his schedule's the plate's kind of full this week. So the next step for Georgia to watch there is when does Kirby Smart go out to Texas and use his one in-home visit?
We'll see if he can close there. Now, when we talk about Terry Bussey, or when you were talking about Terry Bussey, I should say, I read a lot of your insider reports on Dogs HQ heading into the weekend, and you kind of described Georgia is on the outside looking in heading into the weekend.
Yep.
How do you feel about Georgia now that that weekend's over and he's now made his official visit?
I feel better chance last week. I'm not ready to say this kid's flipping to Georgia. I'm not ready to predict him to Georgia, but I do think that Georgia really had a good visit with him. He asked a lot of really good questions. I heard he went into detail about scheme. He also asked about playing both ways some. So he asked some players, hey, how things here? Saturday night, they have the big dinner with him. And I was told that multiple Georgia DBs went to that dinner with Terry Bussey and the people with him to try to let him know, hey, you're wanted here. And this is kind of a tight-knit group. So you look at that, and little things like that kind of tell you he's not there just to have a good time. He was there to check out Georgia, what it was like behind the scenes. And look, he asked the right questions, so we'll see. We'll see how much Georgia, what kind of chance they have coming out of this. But, again, not ready to predict him to Georgia, but I do think this weekend helped any chance they had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a big week with that Kirby Smart in-home visit. Let's shift gears a little bit, talk some QB recruiting for the 2025 class. Now, 2024, it was a little dramatic. Dylan Raiola flipped at the end. Ryan Puglisi stuck. Georgia fans know it was a wild QB recruiting cycle. But for 2025, Rusty, has Georgia where are they in the QB recruiting process? Because I see they don't have any commitments yet.
Very early stages. You also don't forget they had a UNLV transfer a quarterback for about 24 hours, and he decommitted and went back to USC. So it was kind of a wild segment there the last month. Don't forget that little note. But obviously all eyes probably start with Julian Juju Lewis now that he is reclassified, the quarterback out of Carrollton High School. And this is not it's not all Juju or nothing. I think people, I talked to some Georgia fans. They're like, it's Juju or bust. It's not Juju or bust. He is a very high-level target for this Georgia staff. He's going to be on campus this weekend, but they're certainly recruiting a lot of people. And one name I'll give you is Matt Zellers, young man out of Philadelphia, the Pennsylvania area. He was on campus this weekend. Mike Bobo, I believe, went to Philadelphia last week, saw him in person, offered him, and he was on campus this weekend. I think he was at Florida Friday and Georgia on Saturday. But this is a young man, when you watch his tape, 6'3.5", this guy can go, man. He's got a big arm. He can move. He is very, very athletic. I talked to Charles Power last week. I said, hey, this tape jumps at me. And Charles, when Charles don't talk, but he lit up. I couldn't get Charles to quit talking for like 2 minutes. So I can tell you he loved his tape. He was very impressed with him. That's a name to know. One other name many people in the state of Georgia are familiar with is Antoine Hill, A.J. Hill, out of Houston County High School, the 2025. I feel like I've been covering him for 10 years. Kirby Smart lands the Kirby copter last week at his high school. He takes a picture. Kirby Smart was, they're recruiting him. How high on the board? I don't know where he is for them, but he's a person they've long recruited. Kirby Smart, I think, offered him as a 9th or 8th grader. So he's known him for a long time. So certainly some names out there that Georgia's still trying to set that board in 2025.
Yeah, Antoine Hill, he was a one-time Colorado commitment, I should say. He committed to the Buffaloes for about 2 or 3 weeks, back on the market. It seems like Florida is also heavily involved. One more name I want to throw at you, Rusty, and that is Ryan Montgomery out of Findlay, Ohio. For much of this recruitment, it's been South Carolina, Florida, kind of the most mentioned teams in his recruitment. But Georgia's showing interest now, huh?
Yeah, he stopped by. I believe had a recent trip to Florida and South Carolina, I believe last weekend, about 8 days ago. And he stopped by Athens, spent some time there. I think spent the night and met with the Georgia staff. So that's a name certainly on the board for Georgia. But I hear more about Florida and South Carolina around him right now. And again, Georgia's just setting their board. I don't think they really thought they were going to have a whole lot of options in 2025 because they were going to take 2 in 24. And next thing you know, you only take 1. You have one of your top level targets in 2026 reclassify. So they're certainly probably resetting everything right now. In 2025 class, that quarterback position for Georgia is going to be very important.
Yeah, and I think we're on pace for what Georgia would like to do. I mean, they had Ryan Puglisi committed mid-spring last year, and Dylan Raiola committed just a few days before summer began, right before June recruiting started. So they're kind of on pace for what they want to do. And how much of the spring eval period, when that opens up in the beginning of May, how much will that play into QB recruiting?
Well, that will be huge. And Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart both are very high on throwing in front of them. And you look at Ryan Puglisi, he threw in front of the Georgia staff. I think he threw in front of Todd Monken a year and a half ago in June.
Yeah.
They offered on the spot. Dylan Raiola threw as a freshman. They offered shortly after that. So, it's very rare that Georgia will not take someone unless they see them throw. They'd like to see them throw in person. The way the things are now is so sped up. So that spring evaluation, when you're able to go out and see somebody have spring practice or a spring workout and have those kids throw, that's going to be very important. Obviously, they have a large sample size of Juju Lewis. They've seen 2 years of tape of him. They've had him in camp multiple times. So, those questions for him, they've already been answered.
Yeah. Hey, Georgia fans, let me know. Who's your top QB recruit on the board right now? Is it Julian Lewis? Is it Ryan Montgomery, Matt Zellers, Antoine Hill Jr., somebody else? Georgia fans, tap in. Let me know. Comment section below. Rusty, another busy week at Dogs HQ. You got that Terry Bussey in-home visit this week. QB recruiting. The staff is on the road. You wrote about that this morning.
Yeah, big junior day next weekend. They're going to close it out.
Coming up.
They got a big one.
And we're just over a week from 2024 signing day, officially ending that 2024 cycle so we can turn the page to 2025.
Oh, man. Seems like forever, huh?
Yep. All right, Rusty, thank you. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks, Josh.
LSU is bringing back DBU. For years, LSU went uncontested in using the DBU moniker when talking LSU secondary. Things have slipped, though, a little the past few years, but a familiar face, Corey Raymond, is back in Baton Rouge this offseason, and recruiting is already heating up. We're going to break it all down in this video. I got LSU insider Shay Dixon on today. A lot to cover, but first, LSU fans, tap in. Hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel, not because I was the first to predict Bryce Underwood to LSU, but because you love recruiting, right? So hit subscribe, but also because I did predict Bryce Underwood. All right. Let's bring on Shay Dixon from the Bengal Tiger. And over the weekend, the Tigers add to their already #1 ranked recruiting class in 2025 with another elite addition. As you can see, Bryce Underwood, #1 overall. But this weekend, they added cornerback Jabari Antone, another top 50 prospect, #45 overall. So another borderline 5-star. Now, Antone was at the Cajun Bash over the weekend, #45 prospect overall, #2 in the state. So, Shay, how did this one go down? How did they lock him down?
Yeah, look, Jabari's the kid coming out of Louisiana at Westgate, Josh, who he had offers from the who's who of college programs. When you're a top 5 corner nationally, that comes with the territory. But it was brewing as a Texas LSU race. And he had visited Texas for junior day just a week ago prior to his commitment to LSU. I know the Longhorns had held some confidence, but LSU had put in a lot of work behind the scenes to kind of set this up to where he felt comfortable shutting things down when he visited. Then you had the hire of Corey Raymond, which he described as icing on the cake. And a connection here, Corey Raymond, longtime coach, as you said, it's been 10 years straight at LSU before spending a couple of years in Gainesville, is back now. He's a New Iberia native. Antoine's a New Iberia native, so they're familiar with each other. He had recruited him at Florida as a future guy in this 2025 class. I think everything sort of came together with the groundwork LSU had laid, and then the new coach in Raymond coming in, knowing he got a multi-year deal. That makes an underclassman like this feel good about the future. His coach will be there. So this is about as big as it gets, Josh, because he is the number 2 recruit in Louisiana. And we know Louisiana is one of the deepest states in the country when it comes to high-profile recruits. So they knocked down Harlan Berry, the number 1 player in the country, or excuse me, running back in the country, but number 1 player in Louisiana. Now they get the number 2 player in Antoine.
Yeah, and really improving that in-state recruiting. I remember when Brian Kelly arrived, they lost out on 6 of the top 10 players in the state. Last year, they grabbed 9 of the top 10 players in the state. This year, already the top 2 players in the state committed to LSU. They're cooking. All right, let's take a look at those top DB targets, starting here with DJ Pickett. Now, Corey Raymond actually has a great relationship with DJ Pickett because he's from Zephyr Hills High School, which is only about 30 minutes from UF, where Corey Raymond was coaching previously. And DJ Pickett made a ton of visits to UF while Corey Raymond was there. Do you think that helps LSU chances at all?
Absolutely, and you're educating us. See, most LSU fans listening to this are not from St. Pete. They don't know the lay of the land. Where Zephyr Hills would even be, and that's one word, which is surprising as well. But yes, I think big time, because we had not heard them mention a guy like DJ Pickett yet, and he's the number 1 safety in the country. But whenever Corey Raymond moves over to LSU from Florida, he immediately went out and offered or re-offered, however you want to describe it, a lot of those guys at LSU. And Pickett is the first one who says, all right, I'm ready to go ahead and lock in a visit. He's made a number of visits here recently, but he will be at LSU this week. That's big time, immediately seeing kind of some dividends paying off on the recruiting trail by getting the number 1 prospect at safety in America onto campus. Now, the big 3 in Florida have been after him. I know Florida's kind of been a leader on the on-3 RPM. Michigan's in this race. He was going to go see Oregon. So he's a guy who, obviously, being a number 1 player, will get recruited coast to coast. But to make a hire as a secondaries coach with a guy like Raymond, to know that they have that prior relationship, I think will be a big deal, at least in terms of kind of getting into this race, and then if they're able to maintain any sort of foothold in it.
Yeah, I did not know that DJ Pickett was visiting LSU this weekend. So we're going to talk to you on Monday coming out of that to see what happened. But yeah, I knew he was going to make it to campus soon, but I didn't know it was going to be that soon. So DJ Pickett, number 1 safety, will be in Baton Rouge this weekend. All right, let's move to the corner position, talk Dorian Brew. Now, some LSU fans, that name may sound familiar. It's because Dorian Brew's father, Derek, was a track star at LSU. Now, Dorian is a legacy prospect, but Shay, it seems like there's competition. This isn't a slam dunk, is it?
No, Ohio State's been considered the front runner here and pretty heavily favored to land Dorian Brew, who checks in as the number 3 corner on the on-3 industry rankings. So a guy who's very highly thought of. Corey Raymond has already been in touch with them now as the secondaries coach and kind of one of the top corner targets in this class. You've added Antoine. You'd like to now continue to add others. I will say, though, that Ohio State, yes, Josh is the team out front. He's also a kid from Conroe, Texas. So there is some, proximity-wise, LSU isn't far off. He's able to visit here soon. So, yes, I would keep an eye on Dorian Brew, a guy that the LSU staff, much like with Pickett, now can suddenly find themselves in the mix for because they've made a hire like Corey Raymond. But again, let's not get our hopes up too high, considering that most people feel like the work Ohio State's done has put them in a pretty advantageous position.
All right. Another one that Corey Raymond has his hooks in on is Fahim Delaney. Now, we went from the number 1 safety in the country in DJ Pickett to the number 2 safety in the country in Fahim Delaney. Now, he's from the DMV, but Shay, he's been to campus before, right?
He's been to campus a couple of times, and they've recruited. Look, they got Deshaun Womack, a 5-star out of Maryland here recently. Now they're back up there recruiting a guy like Delaney, who, out of good counsel, obviously is a pretty highly a lot of kids have come out of that program, turned out highly ranked prospects. Yeah. You look at him, though, he's one that when Corey Raymond got hired, when Jake Olson got hired at safeties coach, that was very active on social media and in interviews about that sort of boosting LSU stock, a school he was already interested in. Now, again, Ohio State's in the mix, Penn State's in the mix, Virginia Tech's been hanging around. So the schools kind of up there have sort of kind of spearheaded things. But LSU is going to be able to recruit nationally, and DB is a spot that if you find a guy that you like, they'll certainly stay in the mix as long as he's willing to say, hey, I'm going to come down and visit and do all these different things. And so far, we've seen that from him. Like I said, multiple visits already, and he said he's going to be back this spring. So nice to have at least your foot in the door with guys who are ranked number 1 and 2 at the position.
Yeah, speaking of visits, cornerback Gregory Xavier Thomas, he was down at the Battle 7-on-7, one of the top performers down there over the weekend in what is really the country's first big 7-on-7 of the offseason. Well, anyway, he told recruiting analysts over the weekend that he plans to be at LSU this weekend for a visit. Now, he's at American Heritage High School where, that's one of the places where they just breed DBs down there in South Florida. What are you hearing on Gregory Xavier Thomas and his recruitment to LSU?
Another one where it's no surprise to see Corey Raymond involved here, right? I mean, even when he wasn't at Florida those 2 years, they recruited American Heritage heavily. They have American Heritage kids on the team over the years. Obviously, Pat Surtain would be a kid that from a Heritage as a number 1 corner that Raymond at his prior LSU stop was on heavily before he ended up at Bama. And now you kind of, like you said, they're going to churn them out every year. So every year you're going to go down to IMG, to Heritage, to try to stay present in Florida with defensive backs. And look, 6'2", 185, that kind of fits the bill of what Corey Raymond usually looks for in corners. And he wasn't the only one. When Corey Raymond first got on the road, Josh, to go recruit for LSU, he, as I said, re-offered a lot of guys, whether they already held offers from LSU or kind of were recruited by him at Florida. But he wasn't the only one. Shamar Kandi, Raheem Stroud, Tony Williams, all of these guys out of Florida who are in this 2025 class got re-offered by LSU as soon as Raymond got here. So Antoine starts the dominoes, right, for a class that already ranks number 1 in 2025 as that first corner addition. But Raymond is quickly going back to these guys he recruited while at Florida because you're recruiting a lot of the same guys. There's crossover there. He already had found guys, hey, I'm high on these guys in 2025. And it didn't take long for him to kind of reach out to them and say, now that I'm at LSU, you've got a spot, I'm going to turn up the heat. And now we're starting to see, as you noted, visits are lining up already with 2 of the guys we mentioned coming this week to campus. So with Antoine committing 2 visitors this week, it feels like things are kind of happening in a hurry at DB.
Yeah. And just last thing I want to ask you about the DB position. Does it feel different when Corey Raymond returns to LSU? Does recruiting at the defensive back position kind of get a spark when Corey Raymond returns to Baton Rouge?
I could probably sum that up by answering that the Corey Raymond edition was one of our most read articles of the past year on Run 3, at least with the Tigers. So, yes, a familiar face. It's a lot like when Frank Wilson came back, right? It's someone that they know as an LSU coach, that they know understands the kind of expectations at LSU. If you're talking about Raymond, it's DBU. If you're talking about Frank, it's the totality of the program, the importance of in-state recruiting. And also you have to remember, Corey Raymond went to LSU. He's from Louisiana. He began his coaching career here. Whenever the Ed Orgeron era ended and Brian Kelly arrived, he was the longest tenured coach on staff at more than a decade straight as LSU's DB coach, despite teams often trying to get and pry him away from Baton Rouge. They obviously shipped things up right when he got here, but it didn't take long. 2 years for Brian Kelly to say, hey, look, let's bring Corey Raymond back. Name him the secondaries coach, and yes, it was pretty well received.
Yeah, well, I sent you the photo of Corey Raymond jogging across the field in Florida Gator gear, going to shake the hands of the LSU coaches, and I said it just had big Joe Montana vibes, like when he was on the Kansas City Chiefs. Though it just didn't look right, but now everything's back in alignment. Corey Raymond coaching DBs at LSU. Couldn't be at a better time because, Shay, you guys got some big junior days coming up. Bengal Tiger will be the place to be. You guys do a great job covering these. Going to be an exciting weekend. Shay, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop today.
Thanks for having me on, Josh.
Brian Hartline is widely regarded as one of the top wide receiver coaches in the country and the best when it comes to landing top receivers. Last year, Hartline signed 2 5-stars, Jeremiah Smith and Mylon Graham. And in this video, we're going to find out who are the 2025 recruits at the top of Brian Hartline's wide receiver recruiting board. I got Buckeye recruiting insider Matt Parker to break it all down. But first, Ohio State fans, jump on board, hit subscribe. We talk recruiting and transfer portal 365 days out of the year. Hit subscribe for me, please. All right, let's bring on Matt Parker with Letterman Row. And Matt, Ohio State, they already got one wide receiver in the boat, and that's four-star wide receiver Javen Boggs out of Cocoa Beach, Florida. You know, Heartline likes to recruit the state of Florida, already has one on the commit list, but we know he's not done. And here's a look at who his top targets are. Jamie French, Phillip Bell, and Nashawn Montgomery. Let's start right there at the top with Jamie French, fresh off of that decommitment from Alabama. He's already taken a couple visits, but mostly in-state. I know Ohio State is trying to get him up there. What's the latest? What are you hearing when it comes to Jamie French and Ohio State?
Yeah, Josh, you talk about the visits for Jamie French, and it's worth noting that Jamie French visited Ohio State during the fall as part of the South Florida Express 7-on-7 team that was up at Ohio State on October 21st for the Penn State game. And it's, again, worth noting, on that visit, he was an Alabama commit at the time. So he's certainly well-versed with Ohio State, very familiar with Ryan Day and Brian Hartline. And those two coaches were actually down in Jacksonville last week at Mandarin High School, visiting with Jamie French. And that's certainly the guy that's at the top of the board. Right now, it's looking like Jamie French, as part of the South Florida Express team, will be heading up to Ohio State for a spring practice. As per usual, that typically happens every year just because of the connections with Ohio State and so many guys from the South Florida Express that head to Columbus. But look for that visit to happen sometime in mid-March. I would expect that to be a very critical visit, despite the fact how many of the South Florida Express guys will probably be on campus. Jamie French will certainly be under the spotlight for Ryan Day and Brian Hartline.
And he is a good one. Jamie French, the number 14 overall prospect in America. I kind of feel like his recruitment just getting started. I think by the time we hit those summer months, it'll be full hot. And if Ohio State can get him on campus before then, they'll kind of have a foot in the door already when things kind of heat up. All right, next one on the list I got to talk about is Phillip Bell, 108th overall best player. He's from Mission Viejo, California. Ohio State, they like to go to the state of California when they have to, and Phillip Bell, he is a good one. Is there a connection? What's the relationship like with Brian Hartline?
Yeah, that's a relationship that really started in the spring of 2023, where Bell visited Ohio State again for a spring practice, really showing how critical spring ball is for Ohio State, especially with those California prospects. That really seems like the only time that the West Coast kids can make it out to Ohio State, just because it's a little bit easier. It's not a game day visit and things like that. But as you mentioned, Phillip Bell being from California, California is a tough state for Ohio State to crack into. But the last time they got a California wide receiver, his name was Chris Olave. So
Right.
Definitely be on the lookout for Ohio State. I actually like Ohio State right now. I'm not ready to say that they are in the pole position, and I'm not going to put in a prediction or anything like that just yet. But speaking with Phillip Bell last summer at the OT7 Championships in Los Angeles, guy was rocking Ohio State gloves all 3 days he was there, and he's certainly impressed. So I look for him to visit Ohio State very soon. Actually, those first couple of weeks, once that March contact period opens up following the February dead period.
Yeah, the March, April, those are kind of the spring practice months. A lot of teams like to get guys on campus to kind of not only tour the facilities and everything, but see the team in action during spring ball. So it sounds like Ohio State's kind of gearing up for that. Now, one more top target we got to talk about. And he was identified early because I remember talking to you about him in probably September or October. Nashawn Montgomery, back into the state of Florida. He's down there in West Palm Beach, and he's been on campus before, correct?
Yes, sir.
So where on the board is he, and what's the relationship between him and Hartline?
You know, I put Nashawn Montgomery out of Cardinal Newman, which is, again, another program that Ohio State has a great relationship. Pretty much all of South Florida, Ohio State and wide receivers are the handshake emoji. But like you said, Nashawn Montgomery is a guy that Ohio State identified early in this 2025 cycle. And because of that, that relationship with Brian Hartline is super, super important. It almost reminds me just a little bit of that Mylan Graham recruitment, where even though Mylan Graham is from Indiana, so it kind of felt like Ohio State was always going to be the one, especially since it identified Mylan Graham early. Look for some in-state programs for Nashawn Montgomery, particularly Florida, Miami. Those are two programs that I hear about when I'm talking about Nashawn Montgomery with some folks at Ohio State. But again, Josh, it all goes back to the spring visits and getting guys on
Mm-hmm.
campus, which I would expect Nation Montgomery to get on campus, and even camp with Ohio State in June. I wouldn't be shocked by that either.
All right. Well, we're kind of seeing the board take shape right now, and then we'll see him get him on campus. And then that final push will come in June and July to kind of lock those commitments down. Now, one more guy we got to talk about, and this is Trey McNutt. He had a great weekend down in Miami. There was a battle 7-on-7 tournament, one of the first premier 7-on-7s of the offseason. And Trey McNutt, he had a great weekend on both sides of the ball. I don't know if Ohio State's recruiting him as a DB. He's listed as a DB, number 34 overall in the country. So we're talking about a borderline 5-star. Picked up an offer from Miami this weekend. He is a Buckeye legacy, though. So where does Ohio State stand, and what are their chances of landing Trey McNutt out of Shaker Heights?
Yeah, initially that was a recruitment where Ohio State was kind of slow playing it. And then once Matt Guerrieri took over as the safeties coach for Ohio State, the very first stop that he made on the recruiting trail was Shaker Heights, about 2 hours northeast of Columbus, Ohio. And to show the priority that Trey McNutt is to Matt Guerrieri, that was big. That moved the needle for Ohio State in this recruitment. You know, Ryan Day is always preaching the best in Ohio, stay in Ohio. And that's a real program mantra, if you will. And with that Guerrieri visit on the first day of the contact period, Josh, that certainly moved the needle. You asked about where is Ohio State recruiting Trey McNutt. A lot of programs are recruiting him as a cornerback, but Ohio State is actually looking at him as a safety just because of the things that Tim Walton has done with the cornerback position so far in 2025. You already have Devin Sanchez in the class. You already have Blake Woodby in the class. Ohio State is the heavy favorite to land Dorian Brew out of Conroe, Texas. So that board is already filling up at cornerback. Look for Ohio State to really focus on Trey McNutt as a safety instead of a corner.
2025 recruiting is really shaping up. You guys are doing a great job over at Letterman Row covering everything. Thanks for stopping by the Inside Scoop and talking a little Ohio State recruiting with us today.
Always appreciate the time, Josh.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that content, be sure to subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We have a new page dedicated only to recruiting. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now.